I do have a piece of paper which I also put on Hugh Barnard website, and I'll put on the notes here, and I'll just go through it. So I thought I'd have non-technical people. I believe that I've got quite, you're pretty technical. Medium, okay, I'll go through the talk anyway. So I wanted to do something that was a bit more mini unconference, as we did actually last time, but we haven't got the seating for that. So I see at least two problems in the platform co-op world that can do with thought, discussion and technical experimentation. And they are, given Minds.com, Open Food Networks, Open Cycle, I'm just dealing with the two problems that I see to start with the discussion. So given Minds.com, Open Food Networks, Open Cycle, etc., 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 there are connection and supply chain opportunities for federation in these things. Simple example, which actually I'd love to see where I live, is cargo bike delivery from a local food shop, which would require the people, unless the local food co-op is running the cargo bikes, which I don't think they would want to, they need to federate. More complex example, search, production and delivery of some 3D printed component. I actually do some of this, and 3D Hub does it pretty well, but obviously that is in co-op space, you know, so we need something that would do that, to say, of all the 3D printing co-ops, can you print this, how much would it cost to print, etc. That may be a different kind of problem from the Federation. So that's the first problem. Second problem is value transfer. Is that given, for example, as I've just been discussing outside with John, the Bristol pound, let's say Bristol pound, Totnes pound, Brixton pound, all of which are good and useful things, we're going to need to transfer value between all these things. It's okay, we've got plenty of time for discussion, so don't worry. So we're going to need value and clearing operations for these things. So there are some quite successful examples of these things which generally tend to be monocurrency, one of which is Sardex, and that actually Sardex came out of the WIA in Switzerland. I've actually just read the history of that before I came here, and the Sardex guy looked at that before he did Sardex, which is interesting because, you know, that's one of the most successful ones. So I say in that I'm an old-fashioned social credit person. I'm less of a blockchain person. I'm certainly not a Bitcoin person. I actually bloody hate it, but you know, that's me personally. But we may have to deal with different financial philosophies in this as well, which again is perfectly valid. You know, town A may not want to do the same thing as town B. So I'm not a big fan of one ring to rule them all. There's a lot of safety and diversity. You know, for example, some of these things, some of the co-ops are going to fail, some of the financial experiments are going to fail. So those are kind of two, to me, the core problems. Three, in answering the core problems, there's a lot of layers. There's an ontology layer, what things in operation exist. There's protocol layers, like there's REST, there's SOAP, if you're as old as me, which we all hate, but you know, we used in the past. There's versioning problems, there's discovery security problems, until we get down to the intimate details, which is, I want this component shipped from Bolton to London, and then I want it delivered, etc., 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 you know, which is the kind of lowest possible layer. So that is pretty much sort of the tour of the thing as I see it. We don't need to do this now because there isn't that much federation going on, but I don't know whether you went to the main presentation this morning. There's a lot of things with round things and lots of arrows going here and there. You know, I think everyone. There are things that people hope and believe will be federated.
connected to each other.
Connected to each other, sorry.
Yeah.
So it's a problem that I think is coming and that needs to not necessarily be solved like that, because I don't believe it's a single solution, but needs to be thought about. So there we are. There is my introduction.
So I want to just summarise. We've all been working on this for years. We've all done this before, and that's wonderful. And it's wonderful we're still alive to carry on working. Something that occurs to me is, yeah, that's like meet people where they are. So like yes, it's forcing them to pay in a certain way. Having one app for lets and one app, it just creates it really restricts availability and incentive. And what we need to do is drive adoption. And that's another thing that is.
What is the great thing about contactless? And the great thing about contactless is convenience.
Sure.
And that is the big advantage that conventional money has over us at the moment. And it's the thing that we want. That's what you're militating for.
All of these systems are worthless if we don't have adoption. I mean, it's absolutely no point. So I'm very keen to figure out ways of. I think driving adoption is probably the thing. It's the most important thing here, pretty much. Okay, you do want something nice and holistic underneath, but and so what are the answers to that? What's the we can talk wax lyrical for years, which we have done.
I was going to suggest that if you've all been doing it for years, maybe you could tell me what's been successful. Because if this is the problem, bringing stuff to users and understanding their needs and saying, here's a great idea, why aren't you doing my great idea? What have been the points of success? When do things work in this domain?
Well, how many people here know the term requisite variety?
Requisite variety?
It's a it's a generalised fuzzy measure of what we can cope with. It's a bit like Shannon's 10th theorem of information theory about channel capacity. It's what we can cope with.
No, I agree.
It's why two people you can see everything. It's what you can cope with, but there's a limit to how much anyone can cope with in terms of absorbing, processing, assimilating information, making the connections, recognising them, because the ability to actually recognise the pattern of what somebody else is saying as being what you're looking for, and actually being there at the right time to pick up on what they're saying, and having the right communication channels to them at the right moment, so that you're not answering questions before they've been asked. All these different factors have got in the way of communication. And it can take years of reading other people's stuff before you realise, actually...
I'm lost. What are you saying? What are you really saying?
What I'm saying is it takes time to actually recognise the answers of what other people have written, to recognise that these are contacts worth mentioning, and that this particular strand of technology is worth following, because it's not going to be a dead end.
So can I just return to the gentleman in the black t-shirt's question, which was, the way I take your question is, tell us a story of success and what can we learn from that success. And I suppose the other way of doing that, if there haven't been any successes, tell us a story of failure and failures.
Well, I'm talking about trying to bring radically new technology to people who don't have a great deal of capacity to deal with complexity.
There's a bunch of farmers in a region in Australia called Birchip, and they had a Birchip cropping group cooperative of about 430 farmers, and they would cooperate on grain sales and acquisitions of fertiliser. About 3 years ago, they've all moved to GPS tracking on their tractors, so that they can minimise the number of times they go over the same piece of ground and make sure they're on the same piece of ground. And the harvesters do yield mapping, and the fertiliser knows exactly the rate to the soil type. And they were generating all of this data, and then what they found was the essentially local stock and station agents and the grain buyers were having access to their data and using it against the farmers in pricing commodities.
Yeah.
Because when they were more successful, somehow they...
Well, the laws of supply and demand mean that if you're all growing wheat and you're all going to have a good wheat crop, well, then the price per tonne of wheat comes down because there's more of it.
Yeah.
And this information was being collected through the growth season, so that by the time harvest came up, the people who were doing futures exchanges or futures contracts on the back of the potential likely yield of this wheat were charging like very specifically to that group, because it's not like you can afford to truck it another 700 k's to port and get the at port price. You have to get the farm gate price in their case. So then they realised that, shit, we got an opportunity as a group of farmers, but we don't know how our data works. We're farmers, you know. So they've just this last 12 months been able to gain access through an Australian grant system that was for establishing more and better co-ops, and they were a co-op, and they decided to create a data co-op. And so they got about $100,000 to $200,000 worth of government assistance, and so this might be one of the success factors. It was externally financially stimulated. It was an obvious problem where they were getting hoodwinked by the market. They didn't have ownership of their technology. And so they thought, oh, we need a data cooperative so we can take back some of that power. But then they ran into all these interoperability issues, right? So the legal, social and technical interoperability of how do you get a data set from the Bureau of Meteorology and a data set about soil types across 430 different farms to start talking to one another to give value. And then once you've got those data sets talking, how do you actually make a better decision as a farmer as to what you're going to do, what crops you're going to grow, where you're going to sell what futures contracts to take. They realise that their ecosystem at 430 farmers isn't sophisticated enough to get people who are analytics creators so that they can look at that data and pull out meaningful results. And so then they've been able to bring in the chief scientific organisation in Australia, CSIRO, who went, great, we see your data cooperative as a model for interoperability about data cooperatives all across Australia. So another lot of not financial investment but technical investment by the chief scientific organisation enabled them to start getting analytics and packages developed to look after their technology. And so it is early days. The shit climate at the moment in most of the wheat growing and oilseeds growing area in Australia. So I think 7% of the national crop is in Australia. So there's not that much to talk about in 2018, but by the time they get to 2019, these farmers have multiple layers. Each farmer is a member of the co-op for buying fertiliser and buying seed and selling in bulk. Each member is contributing data up to a data cooperative. The data cooperative itself now has the interoperability at all the legal, social and technical layers, and it's being used as a model for other data cooperatives to expand through research organisations in Australia. So that's an example, I think, of where you've got federated APIs, multiple levels of data matching that is a success. And it's basically the only one I'm aware of in Australia. I can't talk about the rest of the world. But we've got lots of problems. But there's one success story in Australia.
And I guess I see a lot of what's happening in this space is basically people creating new essentially new stuff. And that's always going to be a problem because there isn't an ongoing revenue. There aren't, it's very fragile. Whereas that's quite robust. If there wasn't that system, there'd be something. They'd be growing crops anyway, probably not as efficiently, but. So that's quite...
There's a user with a pain point. Who needs that pain point to go away.
Yes.
They're currently, before they got that interoperability, before this implemented one, they're being screwed by the futures derivatives guys who are having access to the data and have the technology at the moment to be able to make sense of it better than anyone else. and they'll be able to use that for their market advantage. So I think it's really about so being user-centric. Who is the user? What is their pain point? And what is the problem from their point of view? Not the problem from our.
If you open your APIs and all our culture is very open, then you expose yourself, as in the smart meters in the UK, basically smart meters in the UK benefit the suppliers of electricity. They do not benefit the community, the consumers, because the future prices can be gamed, there's an awful lot of analytics flying out, etc., etc., etc. So in opening, let's say, you know, we have wonderful co-op world with unicorns, chocolate fountains, and everything like that. It's very interesting to think about the way that we're open, yet we cannot be gamed by people that will predate, you know, which is what happened to that before, you know, I presume that it's somewhat fixed now.
One of the challenges, though, was information asymmetry, right? So all of the information from the tractors was going up into data that wasn't open to the farmers. The farmers had to first of all ask to get access.
Oh,
to
really?
their
They didn't have view of it?
Oh,
No.
yeah, don't you know the story of the tractors,
I
the
see.
John Deere tractors in the US that actually have had to be hacked because John Deere owns all the software in them.
Wow.
So
Yeah, it's
under the guise of we want to know when to give you a service,
Yeah.
for your tractor or replace the air filter.
Yeah.
But essentially, it's also so that because
They were selling the data on to other people
for a profit to the
for
futures
different,
traders
and that didn't,
without the permission or
yeah, the farmers
consent.
probably didn't have a concept that this was happening. Wow.
Well, fortunately, Birchip Cropping Group has a CEO, his name escapes me, who was wise to this. But I don't want to hog the floor, but I have another example of where we want APIs to be federated in Australia. So when you become a member of a co-op, it's more likely you're going to be a member of another co-op, right? Because you've sort of bought into that philosophical as well as business model. But we want a registry that enables, as a member of a co-op, for you to see your membership of all of your co-ops and the status of votes and AGMs and polls and director nominations and all the compliance and governance that goes with it. And in some cases, cooperative shares and cooperative capital units, which are the instruments that we can use in Australia. If you get registry, then you can start to have exchange and you can start to have fair exit and entry prices. And we now recognise as an industry in the co-op space in Australia that it would be great to have a member registry, but the members don't see that as pain. It's not a thing to them that, oh shit, I'd really like a dashboard that helps me. So we see the opportunity, but they don't see the pain point. And there's little value in each of the 1,900 co-ops that are in Australia all chipping in money to make a registry, because some of them are very small, and the large ones that are big mutuals, they've got 80% of the Australian population are a member of a mutual or a roadside motor vehicle organisation and things like that. But they're not going to start chipping in money to make a registry.
We're creating a dashboard, which is and it's a generic idea that it would plug into different services. And so it's very much about the user owning stuff. So one, I would, if we can, err away from centralised systems where it is a kind of a registry, and more mimic that using apps and local data, maybe backed up to whatever cloud you want. But I, the user, own this, and the app can facilitate easier registration, easier plugging into all of these.
Maybe API federation might be less of an issue because it might be easier for us to all adopt holochain-like or holochain technology than it is to get all the technologists and all of the IT managers for all of the co-ops to create a register. That might just be harder because of people and motivations, and take such a long time in adoption. If you've been talking about it for 20 years, maybe it doesn't happen until there is that step change in technology and the user experience and baked in with those qualities.
It really scares me when people say, we'll all adopt something. But if we can build bridges to what they're currently doing, great.
What you've been identifying is interesting because I think a lot of the bridges and the APIs are something that are infrastructural. And we had a thing, I worked in finance a long time ago, we had a thing called the TAP, which was basically a huge publish and subscribe thing, but it didn't really belong to anyone. There were all the departments, as there would be all the co-ops, and this thing articulated all the information. No one really cared about it, except when it stopped working, which it occasionally did. And this is one of the problems, is that these things that bridge and enable access are actually infrastructural.
Yeah. So in our last 4 minutes, I mean, it sounds like we have, like there's an acknowledgement of the need. What do people do next? How do we move from awareness into taking next step?
Because for incentives, people actually need to see the advantage in a number of ways they care about to move towards things. We need redundancy in the system, that avoiding the all or nothing problem. If something collapses, you don't want it to bring the whole thing down. They want it to be sufficiently isomorphic so that all the information flows from covered. This issue of variety is crucial, as I said, so it's a measure of what we can cope with. And Hollow Chain has a lot built into it, which actually acts as a variety attenuator, so that each of the individuals in that network are only presented as much as they're able to cope with. And the problem with adoption in the past, we've never had a sufficient combination of technologies that converge at the right time to enable anyone without money, invested interest in profit above all else, to control the show. Now we're finally in a position to start building network solutions from the bottom up, which network past it with very different objectives. So I'd say that's why we haven't had much traction so far. And I think this year is the turning point. Woo!
I think everything is needs driven. So there was a need for John Deere to collect data from their tractors, so they started doing this data thing. There was the need for the farmers to maximise their personal profit, and to do that working together made sense. And if we're talking about people other than us, if we're talking about actually making social change to large numbers of people, we need to understand their needs. Because if I see 10 different protocols, I have an intellectual need to say maybe there's a way of combining these into one. That's the need of one person. I don't want to invalidate that in my intellectual need. It would be fun for me to work it out, but that doesn't have any value for 50 million other people. So I think these things need to be needs-based. 50 million people minus don't understand what Hollow Chain is. It's completely irrelevant. So we need to either make technologies more accessible, they need to move into the realm of understanding, or you can go the other way and try to educate people. But those are very hard things to do.
We're building an app that is a dashboard to plug into APIs and have generic, and to aggregate services. Could be old ones, current ones, new ones, could be blockchain. You know, we are going to be plugging into blockchain. And aggregate functionality, whatever that might be, buying, selling, registering, conflicting, that kind of thing. And yeah, so I've got 2 more years of funding, so hallelujah.
It's probably something that we need to start as well at the top of Co-ops UK, I think, is that, you know, Co-ops UK gradually must get a bit more technical than it is. And again, not to solve it, but for them to become aware of it, and especially to become aware of the dangers that you've outlined, which, you know, I don't think people are aware of that.
One is to raise the awareness in a way that people know that there is a problem. And the second is to find users who need
use cases, yeah.
So by doing the first thing, raising awareness, you can attract them to them. It makes it easier to find them because they go, I have that problem. So build the awareness of that there is this problem